Today is not the day to let lazy narratives slide. The 49ers absolutely have the roster to bully the NFC, but a beautiful roster does not raise a Lombardi by itself. This begins in the trenches, where one guard could turn into a Pro Bowl-level piece and give Brock Purdy the protection he needs. Then we get into a possible edge addition that screams defensive urgency. We still have a real debate about how many future Hall of Famers are sitting in Santa Clara, and then a cold, honest read on Jack Jones. If you bleed red and gold, subscribe right now, because the demand is simple. This talent has to turn into a title. And this is where the conversation gets serious. The interior offensive line. Everybody loves talking about the names that pop on camera, the touchdowns, the explosive plays, the guys who land in the highlight package. But in January, when the game gets ugly, tight, and physical, a season often lives or dies in the half-second a guard is able to buy. Dominick Puni is walking straight into that type of conversation. Zachary Perelis of CBS Sports named Puni as a breakout candidate for the 49ers in 2026. And that read is not just decoration. It is pressure. It is the kind of projection that pounds the table and says, if this team truly wants to be elite, it cannot keep asking Trent Williams to hold up the entire building on the left side by himself. Puni arrived as a third-round pick, delivered an impressive rookie debut in 2024, and even though he did not quite reach that same level in 2025 according to PFF, he still allowed only one sack. That matters. That is not some empty stat. That is a sign of a competitive floor. It is proof of a player who, even while going through the normal bumps early in a career, did not fall apart when the offense needed stability. And there is another detail this fan base cannot treat like a small thing. He has started every game since arriving in Kyle Shanahan's offense. On a roster that has taken hit after hit with injuries, availability carries real value too. We talk so much about stars, but no star can function if the line turns into a revolving door. Brock Purdy needs at least a pocket clean enough to attack the middle of the field. Christian McCaffrey needs movement, angles, and bodies getting pushed backward. George Kittle can help as a blocker, absolutely, but he cannot be a permanent crutch for an interior problem. The aggressive part of this analysis is simple. Puni cannot just be good for where he was drafted. That conversation is too small for where the 49ers are right now. He needs to climb into the group of the best young guards in football. He has already shown he can be physical in the run game. When he gets rolling, he moves people, opens lanes, and puts real weight on defenders. The next step is pass protection, consistency against interior pressure, and the kind of growth that changes how defenses call blitzes against San Francisco. The PCL injury early in 2025 is a warning, not a lifetime excuse. Health will matter, obviously. But if Puni is right physically, he is one of the most important names in turning this offense from very talented into truly ruthless. Because a real contender does not live only on famous jerseys. It lives on winning in the trench, snap after snap. Now the ball flips to the other side, and this conversation gets even more uncomfortable. When people talk about the San Francisco 49ers, dominant defense is not a luxury. It is the identity. It is the standard. And if the defense goes through a season without scaring quarterbacks the way it should, somebody in Santa Clara has to look around the room and ask, are we accepting this, or are we fixing it before it costs too much? That is why Za'Darius Smith starts to make sense as a possibility. He is back on the market after being released from the Eagles' reserve/retired list, so if he decides he wants to keep playing, he is free to sign with another team. And for the 49ers, that kind of opportunity cannot be waved away with a "we'll see later" attitude. This roster is trying to win right now. Nick Bosa is still the main monster, but depending only on him to destroy pockets is asking for trouble. The 2025 season exposed that. The pass rush fell below the standard this franchise sells, demands, and historically needs. When the pressure does not get home, the secondary starts to suffer. When the secondary suffers, the play calling gets more conservative. When everything gets more conservative, the defense that should be dictating the game starts reacting to it. For a team with Super Bowl ambition, that is unacceptable. Za'Darius would not be brought in to become the face of the defense. That is not the read. The value is somewhere else. Rotation, third down packages, veteran presence, complementary pressure. His resume deserves respect. 3 Pro Bowls, a second-team All-Pro selection in 2020, and 70.5 career sacks. He has played for the Ravens, Packers, Vikings, Browns, Lions, and Eagles. This is not some gamble with no evidence behind it. This is an edge rusher who has produced at a high level, especially in Green Bay, with 13.5 sacks in 2019 and 12.5 in 2020, plus 10 more in Minnesota in 2022. Of course, age and where he is in his career have to be part of the calculation. But that is exactly the point. The 49ers would not need to ask him for 900 snaps. They would need impact in specific situations. They would need someone who makes offenses think twice before sliding all their protection toward Bosa. They would need a veteran who can absorb snaps, teach details, help Michael Williams, and bring some edge back to a defensive line that needs to intimidate again. That is the kind of move that does not always win headlines in June, but it can win a decisive possession in December. And for a franchise that cannot afford to waste another window, that difference is worth a very serious conversation. Then comes the kind of comment that sounds like praise, but to me, puts massive pressure on everybody inside the building. Manti Te'o, on Good Morning Football, looked at this 49ers roster and basically raised the question the entire NFL should be asking: how many future Hall of Famers can fit inside one locker room? He mentioned Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Mike Evans. And his point was not just that the roster is loaded with talent. It was something bigger: huge names, Canton-level resumes, and somehow still functioning inside a team-first structure. That is one of the heaviest compliments you can get in the NFL. Because a star who plays only for stats decorates a broadcast. A star who accepts a role, blocks, sacrifices targets, buys into the plan, and still dominates is the kind of star who can change a franchise's fate. But this is the part nobody can soften. When you have that level of names on the roster, the bar stops being a good season. A good season is not enough. A 12-5 record, a division title, a playoff appearance, all of that is nice, but it does not end the demand. If Trent Williams is one of the greatest left tackles this generation has seen, if Kittle is a historic tight end, if McCaffrey is one of the most productive offensive players since entering the league, if Mike Evans arrives with 6 Pro Bowls and a Super Bowl ring, then this offense has to play like a grown man offense when the field gets tight. On the other side, Fred Warner cannot be treated like just another elite linebacker. He is the kind of player who defines a standard. 4-time first-team All-Pro, the brain of the defense, the presence that organizes everything before the snap. Nick Bosa, when healthy, is a quarterback nightmare, a former Defensive Player of the Year, and a 5-time Pro Bowler. These guys are not here to make the jersey look good on the wall. They are here to decide heavy games. And there is still Kyle Juszczyk, who so many people outside the building underestimate because they do not understand the value of a dominant fullback in Kyle Shanahan's offense. 10 Pro Bowls, 3 straight All-Pro nods, a player who kept alive a position the league tried to bury. He has a legacy case too, especially if this roster finally adds the ring this era is missing. Brock Purdy is a different case, with a different temperature. He is still far away from a serious Hall of Fame conversation, of course. But he has already led the 49ers to division titles and a Super Bowl appearance. If he stays healthy, stays consistent, and keeps playing like a top 10 quarterback for years, the story can shift. That is the weight of right now. What he does with this roster will shape how a lot of people tell his career later. So I am asking the faithful, with this many possible Canton guys on the same team, which name carries the most responsibility in 2026? To me, the answer is not comfortable. It is everybody. When the locker room has that kind of caliber, there is no clean alibi. There is a mission. And in San Francisco, that mission either ends with a trophy or it ends as a wasted opportunity. On Jack Jones, the conversation has to stay dry. No fantasy, no turning a depth signing into the savior of the secondary. He has 38 career starts, 2,949 defensive snaps, and he has shown he can handle real NFL volume. That counts. But he is also on his 4th team, and his 3rd team in 3 years. At 29, that detail is not a footnote. It is central to the evaluation. The 49ers probably did not look at Jones as some random name sitting at the bottom of the market. With his experience, his snap history, and the position he plays, it makes sense to think the team sees him as an option who could start games if the season demands it. That is the value. On a roster that always lives under the shadow of injuries, you need players who do not panic when they are thrown onto the field in the middle of chaos. You cannot get to December hoping a corner with no real background learns everything in 2 weeks. But there is a huge difference between can start at some point and should be treated as a long-term starter. The historical comparison with corners around the same age, volume, and production shows exactly that gray area. Some were starters at 29. Many lost their jobs quickly after that. Others stayed in the league as rotational pieces. Very few became lasting answers. So the honest read is this: Jones brings utility, but he cannot become the main plan. And the 49ers need to be honest and tough about that. A contender cannot build a secondary on, maybe it works. If Jack Jones is the fourth reliable corner, great. If he is the guy who steps in when needed, survives a stretch, and keeps the game from exploding, excellent. But if San Francisco reaches the point where it depends on him as a weekly pillar against the best offenses in the NFC, the problem already started before kickoff. In a perfect world, Jones sits as depth, pushes the room, gives the group experience, and only becomes a main character if the season forces it. That is the smartest role. That is not disrespecting the player. That is contender-level evaluation. Depth wins games when it protects the original plan. Depth becomes a warning sign when it turns into the original plan. In the end, everything points to the same demand. The 49ers are not trying to look good. They are trying to become inevitable. Puni has to become an interior force. Za'Darius Smith, if the opportunity makes sense, represents the aggression a contender cannot lose. The roster has names that feel like Canton, but legacy without a ring becomes a bitter conversation. And Jack Jones reminds you that depth matters, as long as nobody confuses insurance with a solution. The faithful know how big this season is. Santa Clara has talent, pressure, and responsibility. So hit the like, subscribe to 49ers Express, and stay right here, because this run only ends the right way if the red and gold finish the job.